Christians.
Mm.
There was a time when, people would be, well, back in the day, when people were afraid to admit that they were Christians because they were persecuted.
Uh-huh.
And we got past that. At least I think we got past that. Humanity got past that. And then now we are kind of in a situation again where if you admit and you say you are a Christian, you are being looked at. How should I say this whole idea of Christian nationalists or national whatever they call themselves now that people
Mm-hmm.
don't agree with. You have to show yourself not to be a part of that and be, gosh, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
it is as though we're going in a circle, as we all do, always do.
Sure.
But we have to be willing to boast of being Christians and being true Christians, not being a Christian who wants to get everything around, get everything, wants to be a power. You have to boast of being a Christian who believes in Christ and a Christian who loves.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
we've gone back to a stage where it is getting kind of hard
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're being judged by other people's nonsense.
Yes. So you can't really be a Christian in name. You have to show it. You have to
You
do it.
have to show it. You have to
Yeah.
show it.
Yeah.
That's
Thank you.
so true. We do have to show that whoever is watching is we're doing what's right.
Mm-hmm.
We can't
Exactly.
we can't be we can't be doing it two ways, accepting both ways.
Exactly.
So true. Anyone else?
I just have a brief comment. Many years ago, where I was living, people had a habit of asking, "Are you a Christian?" And I
Uh,
wouldn't answer. I'll ask a question. I say, "What do you mean by Christian?"
uh-huh.
That's what I would say. Because some people have a set way of how you're supposed to behave and,
How you're supposed to
to be
dress, how you're
dressed.
supposed to
Yeah.
look.
So right. So that's what I respond with. And then I said, "What do you mean by being a Christian?" And most times they don't say anything after that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because many times people will look at those kinds of externals and forget that the real externals are how am I loving my enemies? How
Exactly.
am I doing good to those who persecute me? How am
Right.
I feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and welcoming? Those are the signs, right? What kind of dress you wear or don't wear doesn't really make a difference. What kind of shoes you have on doesn't make a difference, but it is how we live the life, and it's about living it, not about dressing up for it or something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Also, for me, Father, somebody asked me that, and my response would be, yes, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I try to follow the
Mhm.
example he
Right.
leads. Yes, like loving each other, helping each other, doing whatever you can. And I think that is the more Christian thing
Hmm.
when you say you're a Christian, not like the national Christian they call in themselves. Because I say if they read the Bible and they know who Jesus is or was, they would never act this way, for the immigrants, because he
Yeah.
said, welcome the immigrants.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
I remember a couple weeks ago, I was in the uh, to get a X-ray, and we were sitting there waiting. Women with a mammogram, and this woman was like way in thought, like you could see, you know. So I said, I hope everything is okay with it. And something just tell me, turned to her and said, "Are you a Christian?" And she
Mm,
said, "Yes." And then she turned to me and said, "I can see it."
mm,
Yeah. But yeah, usually I don't ask them. For that
right,
day,
right.
felt that I had to.
Okay. Yeah. Mm.
You know, Father Daly, quiet demeanor does not really depict or make you more of a Christian than somebody who you may judge as worrisome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think basically my observations is that folks are getting over that way. The resentment of militant people who think what's wrong is wrong, regardless to wherever they're sitting, upper
Yeah.
hierarchy, whatever, lower,
Yeah.
whatever. And when your demeanor gives you the privilege to say that you are a Christian, I question that.
Yeah. Again, it's in how the person lives. It's otherwise the what they're showing us is the complete opposite. Yeah.
I remember many years ago when I was back home, I was at work and I had a lot of us from the islands would understand when you say you had Christians were supposed to have a certain look.
Mhm.
And there was this lady who she was one of my supervisors and she was supposed to be a Christian. She went to church every Sunday. She always had her Bible with her and everything. She was the meanest person I can say I ever worked with in the bank. She
Mhm.
was she was so selfish. And I remember one day I was so upset, that I told her, you are too mean for the person that you're trying to say you are too mean. She was even selfish in her handwriting then. She would write a note for you and you would have absolutely no idea what it is she has on the paper.
Mm.
Even down to something as silly as that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because she carried a certain demeanor, because as I said before, she dressed a certain way, she didn't go here, she didn't go there, she didn't wear makeup, and
Yeah.
she had natural hair and whatever. She, along with some people back in that era, considered themselves Christians, but they forgot the part where you need to love.
That's
And
the
you need to
problem.
love everybody. You need to love the man at the
Exactly.
corner of the street. You need to love the person who you consider is bad because they're gay. You need to love everybody because we are all God's children, all of us.
Amen. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the real sign. It's the only sign, really.
Yeah,
Everything else, they could wear a cross, they could, I don't know, they could
exactly.
go to church
Yeah.
every day, they could
And like I
carry,
said, every afternoon she eating lunch and reading the Bible.
yeah, they could carry the heaviest Bible. It really doesn't make a difference.
That's right.
It's how do we live
How do
and
we
how do
live?
we interconnect with each other? That's the
So,
only thing that shows.
so being a
So,
Christian is always working at it.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah, because you never accomplish it.
Mm-hmm.
See, if you think you've accomplished living Christianity, you haven't. That's the first sign of it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at how good I am. All right. No different than the Pharisees. Thank you.
That's
Remember the
right.
Pharisees, the story Jesus tells us. The
Hmm.
Pharisees in the temple saying, "Thank you, God, I'm not like this guy." Right. And this
Yeah.
guy was the publican who put his head down and never even dared to look up
Mhm.
because he didn't want to in any way challenge God. He was a humble heart and he kept his eyes down and so yeah, we look at that and it's self-righteousness. That's what that is.
Yeah,
And
that's exactly it.
and think that you can judge everybody else which you think you're so whatever Christian or holy or some other stupid thing, but it
Father
has
Deal,
nothing to do.
Father
Yes,
Deal,
yeah, go ahead.
I think society has made it that way.
Yeah.
So
Because
we are
on the flip
society.
side, a person who is poorly dressed, who is dirty, who looks disgusting, the first thing you meet is the outlook of the person. And
Yeah.
then you are introduced to the inner
Mhm.
person. So if that presentation that they're bringing to you does not speak words, then of course, you're going to judge them differently.
Yeah.
And we have two sayings: never judge the book by its cover.
Of course.
And another one, still waters run deep.
Mm-hmm.
So that person can be calm and everything, but then there's a deeper, vicious nature in them.
Yeah.
And another, don't judge the book by its cover. We can see that shabby looking person and tell ourselves that, okay, that person is not of God. But then when you do get to meet the inner person, you come up with something totally different. But
Yeah.
my takeaway is that society has put a label on what Christianity looks like, seems like, feels like. And it's our responsibility to know what is the true meaning of being a Christian.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like every day we wake up, we talk about the government.
Mhm.
Every day we wake up, the government. Who is the government?
We are.
That's right.
Mhm.
Every day you hear it. You walk in the neighborhood here, and certain people, the chosen ones, don't clean their sidewalks.
Mhm.
And you hear them say, "Oh, the government would do it. The government would do it. The government would do it." Wait a minute. Somebody misunderstood the game here.
Yes.
I thought we were the government.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Father Deal,
Yes.
may I say, that most of the times it's the people in the church, the professors. I don't mean the professor who stand next to a class and is teaching. Those who professed to
Yeah.
be Christians,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's a shame it has to happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
People are trying, not really doing. They're trying their level best because it's not easy to walk against the devil.
Yeah.
It's like you're parallel of the devil, and you have to be strong in the Lord. So when you pray, you have to say, Lord, walk with me and talk with me, because the devil is a very smart guy.
Yeah.
The adversary, I should say, is a very smart guy. He knows how to get around you.
Exactly.
So you have to be very careful, especially in the church of God, to be able to do the right thing. People in the church are doing good things. I'm not saying no. And there are others who criticize what they're doing. And that's not right.
No.
Let the person do what he feels like doing. If he's happy about it, let it alone. But it's always a song, a never-ending song. You can lift the person up. Yeah, it's like a song.
It is.
It's like recurring decimal over and over. Leave the person alone. He knows how he feels about God. So we have to be very careful when we call ourselves Christian. And I notice everything that everybody's saying, everything everybody's saying today, it's going around and it's happening.
Sure.
It's happening. Yes, Miss Curtis.
Miss Adams, this morning I pulled two ladies over this morning.
You pulled me over too?
I pulled two ladies over. I know your game is a little bit different. They weren't happy about a specific person being dressed the way they were with people's children. So I pulled them over. Oh, I didn't know you hear me. That's what you do. You sit in the back to listen to everything. I said, oh, yeah, and I try not to miss anything. It's wrong what y'all are doing. Clothing does not matter. Stop it.
Yeah.
Come naked as you are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I said, I don't mean literally.
There's a wonderful
He's going to get me now. Huh?
There's a wonderful quote of St. John Chrysostom when he says that the beggar at the door, when that beggar is judged not worthy to come into church, then don't think that the wine in the chalice is Christ. Because if you
Oh,
can't
Lord.
see Christ in that beggar,
In the
you
portion,
can't see
right.
Christ. Yeah, see, it's that double standard. We play this game. Well, I'm so holy and I do this and I do that. But if we step over the person at the front door or judge them or watching what they're wearing, hell yeah, then for you, when you come up for communion, there is no Christ there because you have rejected him.
Yes.
Amen.
It's really what St. Paul's talking about in chapter 12 of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, when he says the person who receives communion unworthily, that's what he's talking about. He's not talking about, I don't know, they didn't say their prayers or something before they came to church. We receive communion unworthily because we're not seeing Christ in the people around us. Because we're talking about them, because we're judging them, because we're more concerned about what they have or who they're with than watching our own selves.
That's right. And also, Father dear, I would not hold you. Sometimes I see people and they see me and they say, "Hi, Miss, how are you?" And I say, "Hi." Somebody say, "Oh, you talking to that person? Oh, he looks like whatever, whoever, whatever."
Yeah.
I say, "Well, that's God's people."
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not higher than him. He may be dressed that way, and he may be looking that way. Probably if he's on drugs, whatever. But say a word. One word can turn that person around. One single word. If I say, "Do you love Jesus?" Three words. And most of the time they would say to me, "You must remember to pray for me here." I say, "With pleasure." I pray for everyone. You cannot be like you are above their status.
Well, exactly.
You can't do that.
Yeah. We're not above anybody's status. Yeah.
We are all God's people.
Exactly. So today,
Brother Joe, before you go,
go ahead.
I
Yes.
wanted to ask, do you see God at work in your life? That's one of the questions that he asked in his sermon.
Are you asking me or are you?
No. I'm saying that this is what he said. It was one of the
Yes.
questions that he asked. Do you see God at work in your life? And he recommend draw near to God.
Yeah.
And then he went on to talk about faith.
So faith ultimately is our trusting in God, right? And I think it's a really important question that we ask ourselves. Do we see God at work in our lives? Because if we don't see God at work in our lives, are we exactly in a relationship with God then? See, because we need to honestly look at ourselves and you know, if there are days when we sometimes if there are days when we sometimes can control our anger at somebody, or if there are days when we can sometimes be patient, or if there, well, then we're working at it, you know, because no one will ever fully accomplish living the Christian life. And as soon as I think that I have, I am not, right? Once I think, oh boy, how good I am, well, that's the end of it. That's the end of the story. I've already begun going down the slide into a mess. Yeah. So it's that false piety and that false, you know, saintliness and the false holiness. Yeah, no, we're all always beginners. We're all always struggling to live the Christian life. And you know, if we could get through a couple of hours of trying to do it, that's pretty good. Yeah, but in a 24-hour period, how often are we attentive to the goodness of God in our lives and the presence of God in the people around us? You know, that's the real question. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to remind us of that, Ms. Myrna. Yeah. So
Sorry.
go ahead.
So how willing are we to assist each other as far as certain knowledge or whether it's Christianity or otherwise?
Yeah, absolutely. That's
it's a problem because especially you find it's a struggle because folks run away with the wrong impression because your demeanor is not the same as theirs or others.
Yeah.
That, oh, she's showing off. Oh, she thinks she knows everything. I don't think anybody knows everything.
Yeah.
But I think in regards to church folks, I don't think people are willing to open up their ears at all.
Yeah.
It's my way or no way.
Well, I think that's exactly what Jesus was saying constantly, right?
Yeah.
Jesus is so critical of the religious folks. He's not critical of the people who are outside the law. He's not critical of the people who don't live up to it, but he's quite critical about the religious folks because they do what we do. You know, we very easily fall into this thing like, I've got it, and you know, those poor schleps, they don't, you know, and that's, that can't be.
I had a situation this morning. This lady lost a relative abroad. And because she came in and her shoulders were down, and I said, "What's going down with you?" And she explained that she had a debt abroad, and she been calling the office, and you know, there's no, she can't get through. But I said, "Did you put it on the machine, on Father's machine?" Yes. I said, "But look, rather than you get upset and frustrated and because your sister is not announced, Father is in his office now. Calm down, go down, and remind him that you put something on his machine so that you can get an announcement. Is that what you want? Do you want an announcement?" She said, "Pa." She said, "Yes."
Okay.
She went down and she came back up happy as a lark. It was going to be announced because somebody in the other part of the world is listening to the service.
Yeah.
But the poor soul had run away with all the wrong. They're not trying to be helpful to her, and she's a member. I said, no, we're not going to go there.
Yeah.
What you're going to do, you're going to go down there, and you're going to remind Father that you did put it on his machine. Okay? It's difficult dealing with folks these days.
Yeah, those are important things to do. Yeah. Right. So we're going to beginning to look at the writings of Paul. And if you wanted to, this might be a good idea. I mean, I guess I'll do this for a couple of weeks. I'll give you the list. There are authentic letters of Paul, but then there are inauthentic letters of Paul. Letters that we say Paul wrote, but he actually didn't. And, you know, with studying the way persons use language, they could figure out, was this the same writer? And so that's kind of, you know, the science of, you know, understanding language has helped us to understand this, right? So somebody like Saint Jerome, all right, so Saint Jerome lived around the 2nd century, and Saint Jerome translated the Bible from the Greek into the Latin. And Saint Jerome made a whole bunch of mistakes, but he didn't know that he was making mistakes. It was only what he knew back then, all right? And so he couldn't know what you and I know. So when he wrote that such and such was written by St. Paul, in fact, he was simply doing the best he could because that's what was shared. That's what people thought. For instance, St. Jerome thought Matthew's gospel was the first. So that's why when you and I go to the New Testament, that's why we read Matthew first. But in fact, it was Mark who wrote first, not Matthew. Mark wrote around the year 70, and Matthew and Luke write somewhere between 80 and 90. So much later, all right? But St. Jerome didn't know that. You and I could know that because they can do testing on the documents. They can do all kinds of stuff that St. Jerome would have had no recourse to. You know, he couldn't do any of those things. All right. So I'm going to talk what we're going to study over the next months, will be the letters of Paul. We're going to do the authentic letters of Paul first, the ones that we are almost positive, more than 90% positive, that he actually wrote. The others they took his name because, he was a pretty important character, okay? And we know that that's true of other books in the Bible, like, for instance, right, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible that we studied. If you remember when we did that, it took us almost forever to do it. We read those first 5 books. Well, the Jews, when they finally put it all on paper, said, well, Moses wrote them all. Except, again, we know that some of the books were written almost 1,000 years after Moses lived. So it would be really hard to be writing letters and writing books and all that stuff after you're dead. So we also know that some of it was written before Moses existed. Again, that would have been a little bit hard for him to do. But they say that the first 5 books were written by Moses because, he was an important character, a very important character of the Old Testament, and most important of the Torah. All right. And so they had a different understanding about authorship than we do today. Today, we would probably sue them or something. But so this is important, though, when we're reading Paul, because Paul has a strange kind of reputation. Some people hate Paul, but they probably hate him for the wrong reason, because some of the stuff that they're hating him for, he never wrote. And so what we're going to try to do...
I think I fall into that category.
Oh, okay. So we're going to put it all in the context so that we can figure out what he wrote and what he didn't write, and why he wrote in certain ways when he wrote certain letters. Okay? So if you wanted to write down the list, and again, I will do this again next week, or you can go right to YouTube today and listen to this part of our conversation, and you can get this list. All right. So our Sunday Bible study, as well as our Wednesday Bible study, as well as Thursday night spirituality, will all be on YouTube. All right. It started last week. So it'll be a good way to review what we talk about, as well as a good way to share with your friends, relatives, other church folks, those who live near and those who live far, all kinds of things. So we could do a bigger kind of teaching. All right. So this is the list. It seems as though he actually wrote Romans. Then he wrote 1 and 2 Corinthians. He wrote Galatians. He wrote Philippians. He wrote 1 Thessalonians. And he wrote Philemon. All right, so 7 actual letters of Paul. All right, this is the second Paul, is what we could call this. And these are the disputed ones. He probably did not write these. Ephesians, Colossians, and 2 Thessalonians. And we're going to call this third Paul, and he probably had no contact at all with these at all. They're sometimes called the pastoral letters. It's 1 and 2 Timothy and Titus. All right. It looks as though these are written about 2 generations after Paul. Okay. So again, how can they figure this out? From language, right? So we speak obviously American English, but American English 150 or 200 years ago was different than the way you and I express ourselves. So there is a way to tell when something is written. All right. So when they look back to the ancient languages, that was just as true. I mean, communication is communication. The use of language is the use of language. And so when they go through those kinds of studies, now I don't know how to do that at all, but they do. So the scholars know how to do that. So we're taking the scholars' information and trying to do something with it. Okay. So that's an important thing. All right. What are the authentic letters of Paul, and why did he write those letters in the way he wrote them? Remembering he writes them to particular congregations. Why does he write them to those congregations? Probably because he received a letter from them stating what was going on in their church and they needed help with. That's why he's answering. Sometimes in some of the letters, we might call it like 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. I think it's in 2 Corinthians that the scholars see 4 different letters. Again, they were able to break down language and see what he's actually answering. Well, he was answering 4 different things. So he must have received a number of letters, right? What is sad from one angle is we don't have those letters. We don't know exactly what they were asking. And he's answering them. So all we have are his answers, because these letters would have been the things shared in their communities. Remember, there's no Bible yet, right? There's no Old and New Testament together yet. As a matter of fact, when Paul is writing, there are no Gospels yet, right? So let that sink in. Paul's writing before the writing of the Gospels, okay? So all they have are the teachings of this pastor, and he's sharing them. He's answering them. Remember, he planted churches. He started communities where there were no communities. And so that's why they're asking him, hey, what do you do when this comes up? You know, I know we planned for a certain thing, but this other issue appeared. What do we do now? Or someone has asked this question and we don't have the answer. Do you have an answer? All right. So all those kinds of things happen. Remember also, he is writing in a church that's persecuted. All right. You have to remember the Romans are persecuting the church. Now, we just finished the book of Revelation, which was a whole book on persecution and who the enemy was, which was Rome. Well, Romans were attacking Christians, but also Jews, zealot Jews, strong Jews, Jews who couldn't see that there was this other group emerging. They were persecuting Christians, right? Because up until this point, those who called themselves Jews and those who called themselves people of the way, because that's what early Christians were called, people who followed the way, and we know Jesus is the way, they were being persecuted by their fellow Jews, all right? And all of that went on until the year 90, okay? In the year 90, Jews and what we call Christians stopped worshiping together. What we, Christians, people of the way, we were simply a sect of Judaism. Just like today, there are Lubavitch Jews and there are conservative Jews and there are Orthodox Jews, and but they're all Jews. Well, we were one of those sects, all right, way back 2,000 years ago. We were the sect that was called the Way. This people of the Way ended their relationship with the Jews in the year 90, because in the prayer book of the Jews, when they were doing the prayers of the people, there was a prayer in there that a curse be upon all those who follow the way. Well, that kind of made it a little bit uncomfortable if you're sitting in synagogue and you're a person who follows the way, and the guy next to you says, and may the curse be upon them. Like, oh, wow. Okay, maybe I don't feel so comfortable here anymore. And that really was the beginning of the split between Christians, what we call Christians, and Jews, all right? But up until that point, up until the year 90, we were the same group, except we were a group that believed the Messiah came. Just like today, the Lubavitch Jews think the Messiah came in their Rebbe, but they're still considered Jews. All right. Back in our time, and when we're looking at Christian history, before the year 90, we were like the Lubavitch group. We thought Jesus was the Messiah. And they said he is not the Messiah, and curse be upon you. All right. So it's kind of a parallel story. That's why I like watching the Lubavitch community, because they are today in a place where we were 2,000 years ago. All right. And
are they the ones, Father, that put up the sign saying Messiah is here?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Okay. So that Rebbe, who was their head, Rebbe, they considered that he is the Messiah. And what he said, well, surely some of the things Jesus said, right? And they're waiting for him to rise from the dead. All right. So they see him as Messiah. But I also have shared this a number of times, and some of you have heard this before. It was 10 years after the Rebbe's death. And in the New York Times, there was a couple of great articles on it. But one of the articles had interviewed the pallbearers of the Rebbe. All right. So they're carrying his body out before they obviously go bury him. And one of the men said, and he was no longer a believer. He was no longer a Jew. He was no longer a Lubavitch person. He was out of it. All right. And he said that day he was one of the pallbearers. He's carrying out the coffin. And he said the coffin was heavy. And when you go up those steps from the front of the Lubavitch place on Eastern Parkway, because the synagogue is down some steps, he said, you feel the body in the coffin moving. And he said, I just stopped believing. Another man who was also carrying the coffin said, as we were carrying the coffin, it was as light as a feather. I knew he had risen from the dead. Okay? This is the story of Jesus. Because the experience of the resurrection happens in the person who has put their trust in the one who rose from the dead. When we read some of the stories in Acts of the Apostles, what do we find? Well, Jesus appeared to 500 here, appeared to these disciples on the road, appeared to all these different people. But it never says Jesus appeared to Pontius Pilate or Herod or the Caesar in Rome. How come? Because they already didn't trust God. So it has to do with our trust, which goes back to Father's sermon today, right? And of course, he focused it on the letter from the Romans. So the focus is, how do you and I trust this God who gives life to the dead? It's all about that.
Yeah.
All right. It's all about trusting God and going where God would lead us. All right. And if God leads us to the cross, then God is surely going to lead us out of the tomb. All right. But it goes back to that. So it's really, really important to kind of understand that. Paul is going to be an interesting character. He is strong for God. He's a real believer. He's a strong believer, and he wants to do the right thing, and he's doing the right thing for his Jewish faith. And then has this crazy experience. And then he does the same thing for the renewal of his faith, but now following Jesus. All right, so that's how we're going to couch this, and we'll look at it. Okay?
Father Dylan can't hear me. Even I put it on. Did I do something wrong here? Even I put it on.
You can't hear, or you're saying you can't hear me, or no? Miss Adams?
I think she's saying that you can't hear her.
I can't hear. We can hear you. All of us can, I think.
She says you can't hear her.
But I can.
She was calling before while you were speaking.
Oh, well, I was speaking. I didn't hear what I was speaking. So, Ms. Adams, are you there?
Yes, Father Deal, I called you before, but I'm wondering if something is the matter with the phone, because I was trying to catch you before you went that length, because I was a little misled by my thoughts.
Okay.
What else you were talking
yeah.
about? You were talking about Christians and Jews. So I was asking you if there's a dichotomy between those two, because the Christians would say they believe in God, and the Jews would say they believe in God. So if you can untangle that little knot for me.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Please. So they both believe in God, but do we believe, the one group believes that Jesus is the way to God. Jesus is the revelation of God, and the other group doesn't believe that at all. Okay?
Isn't that something like with Islam as well? Islam believes in the same God as well.
Absolutely.
They believe that Jesus was a prophet.
Yep.
They don't believe in his divinity.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we are so much alike.
Yeah.
And yet we cannot live together.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. See, so we all believe in God, but then if we have a different prophetic message, we don't necessarily believe the prophetic message. So of course, and we can't even say today, we can't even say that there are Jews who don't believe in Jesus. There are Jews who believe in Jesus, not the group that's, whatever, the Jews for Jesus or something. Yeah, not even that. Right. But because there are Jews who believe Jesus was a great prophet, like many of the Muslims believe. Remember, also the Muslims have a clearer sense of this only because Jesus is mentioned in the Quran. Mary is mentioned in the Quran. Jesus is not mentioned in the Old Testament. Okay? But he is mentioned in the Quran. Now, when was the Quran written? It was written 500 years after Jesus. Right? So Islam is a later development. First is Judaism, then is Christianity, and built on top of Christianity and Judaism is the Muslim tradition. All right. So that tradition comes later. And their prophet, their leader, their teacher is Muhammad. All right. So, but they don't see Muhammad as God or something. He's the prophet, he's the teacher. And in the writing of the Quran, Jesus and Mary are both characters there, along with Moses and a whole host of Old Testament people. All right. So if you ever get a chance to read the Quran, it's worth reading because you'll get a sense of where this religion developed from. All right. And it developed from Judaism and Christianity. All right. It's written after Christianity had it existed for 500 years already. Okay. Did that make some sense? Yeah.
A lot of sense.
Okay.
A lot of sense.
Good.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Paul's conversion is detailed in Acts chapter 9. All right. But there are other conversion stories in Acts 22 and Acts 26. We'll look at all three of them because that means Luke, who writes the Acts of the Apostles, Luke has a bunch of stories about Paul. As a matter of fact, most of what he writes in Acts has to do with Paul. So Paul is a main character in the book called the Acts of the Apostles. All right. So we get a little bit of a history, or what I might call a little extra history. Some of it might be some of Luke's creativity around who Paul is and how Paul acted. Okay. So we can't say, oh, if it says it in the Acts of the Apostles, it actually happened that way. He's an editor and he's a writer and he's flowery and he takes some stories and does a little, poetic license with it. And all right, so it'll be interesting. And if we were to read Acts chapter 9 against the letter to the Galatians, which we know Paul actually wrote, Paul says the complete opposite of some of the things in Acts 9. So it's hard to take everything that Luke wrote as being actual. All right. So it's one of those things where we kind of have to decipher, take out some of the knots and look at what are they both getting at? What is Paul getting at in his authentic writing? And what was Luke trying to paint a picture about? Okay. Let's see. All right. So Paul has an encounter in Acts 9 with Jesus. It's dramatic, and it's about a gigantic transformation. Remember, he is such a powerful, faithful Jew. He was a Pharisee. He is so powerful in this that he goes against anyone who is trying to say anything different. Okay? So this takes place in the Paul experience somewhere around the year 33 to 36, all right, while he's traveling to Damascus, all right, to arrest followers of Jesus, right? He wants them arrested. He wants them dragged to Jerusalem. He wants them to be put on trial, all right? And it says on this road to Damascus, Paul was blinded by a divine light, and he heard Jesus's voice and was subsequently converted. Later, he's commissioned to preach to the Gentiles. All right. So that's the key of the story. What I'd like to do now, let's look at the time. Okay, I think we'll get through chapter 9, or we'll have to come back to it because it is a little bit long, I guess. Okay. Yeah, well, we'll start chapter 9. And let's see what happens.
Where are we?
We're in Acts of the Apostles, chapter 9, verse 1. Okay? Acts of the Apostles, chapter 9, verse 1. Now Saul, still breathing murderous threats against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest. All right, so he's a Jew. He's a Pharisee. He goes to the high priest to get permission. All right. So that means he's in Jerusalem. All right, goes to the high priest in Jerusalem. And he asked him for letters to the synagogue in Damascus, that if he should find any men or women who belonged to the way, all right, so we would call the people of the way, he might bring them back to Jerusalem in chains. On his journey, as he was nearing Damascus, a light from the sky suddenly flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He said, Who are you, sir? The reply came, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Let's stop right there. Okay? All right, let's just take the story and look at it now. So here is Paul. He's a zealot for, his understanding of Judaism in the way he understands it, in the way he was brought up in it, the way he was taught it, all right? And he was not going to change the way he thought about his religion. And he surely was not going to put up with any of these new age people, right? The people of the way. What is this all about? All right. And sure, they think this guy, Jesus, was Messiah. All right. And they have to be wrong because this is not the right person. And he didn't do anything that Paul was expecting him to do, like conquer the Romans. What on earth is this? This guy was, killed with criminals. right? He didn't come into Jerusalem with a chariot and horses and riders and swords. He came into Jerusalem on a donkey. What are you talking? How could this be the Messiah? You are so wrong, right? And all of that's going through Paul's head. Like where did you people get the idea? That's what he's saying. All right. And so now he said, he says to the priest at the temple, give me a letter so that I have your permission to go round these folks up, bring them back in chains. They'll be put on trial in the temple, and then because they're blasphemers, we will stone them to death.
Oh,
that's the goal. Okay. Lo and behold, he's on the road to Damascus. All right. Now again, notice he's on the road. And there's a little play here. Where is he? He's on the way. Is a little joke? He's on the way.
On the way to get the people of the way.
Of the way. Okay. All right. So he's on the way. All right. So there's the writer is trying to bring something out here. All right. And he's going to Damascus. Okay. And I remember writing a paper on this in my first year of college. But I remembered some of it. And what I suggested is, well, on the way could have meant he was even in the Damascus, Hotel 8. Don't take it literally, all right? He's on the way. He knows what he has in mind. And then all of a sudden, he has an awareness. An awareness of what? Of Jesus. Was it a vision? Maybe. Was it a dream? Maybe. Was it a new thought? Maybe. We don't know exactly what this means, but they're trying to describe something that was overwhelming, okay? And when you try to describe something that's overwhelming that you can't really put into words, what are you going to use? Light, sometimes thunder. He fell. He was on the road, on the way, and he falls, all right? He stumbles, all right? And in his stumbling, he encounters the risen Christ. Well, the risen Christ hadn't shown up for years, but now he shows up on this road or in the Damascus Marriott. He shows up. And what does he say? And I think this colors the rest of what we understand about Paul. He said, why are you persecuting me? That's what the realization was here. Saul has the awareness that this Jesus is somehow alive.
Yes.
And the voice is saying to him, why are you persecuting me? But Saul never met Jesus. Saul didn't know who Jesus was. He's heard the stories. He knows the followers of Jesus. That's who he's persecuted. That's who he's arrested. He never arrested Jesus. All right? So this is a big opening, a big awareness, a big awakening. Wait a second. If I hurt one of those people who are a follower of Jesus, I'm actually hurting Jesus? Whoa. This is brand new stuff. Saul never heard this in temple, never experienced it in synagogue, never taught anything like this. There was nothing in the Torah that said or prepared him for this kind of encounter. And so he says, who are you, sir? The reply, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. Could you imagine what Saul felt? Could you imagine how he may have been shaking in his pants? Could you imagine how his whole world was turned upside down? And he who had been a seeing man, this might be metaphor, says he was blind now. He couldn't see ahead of him. He had been blind to Jesus and the story of Jesus and to the realization of Jesus' resurrection all along. So he falls, he stumbles from where he was. He can't see. He's blind, unable to see the Christ. In fact, he would be no different than Herod or Pilate or the Caesar. But if this man had been a faithful Jew, he knew his studies. He knew how he was supposed to live. That's where the opening was. That's where God could get in. That's where he could begin to hear Jesus' voice in his own heart. Because he was already faithful. He was totally mixed up, confused, especially about the people of the way and who Jesus might be. But he was open to God. But now he had something brand new to deal with. And Jesus now says to him, now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. And so you can imagine the other riders with Paul, his friends, co-workers. They take him into Jerusalem because he says, I've got to go to Jerusalem. The men who were traveling with him stood speechless, for they heard the voice but could see no one. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand and brought him to Damascus. For 3 days, he was unable to see, and he neither ate nor drank. Again, he's in shock. Was he totally wrong? And you and I know when we've had those experiences, when we've been totally wrong about something, who could eat? Right? Nothing is the same. Everything is confusing.
But Father Deal,
yes,
the reason for calling him sir, I find that was a good introduction, sir. But
he was being polite, right? So he's saying,
right,
sir,
right.
Mr. Mr. Who are you? It's a man's voice. Who are you, Mr.? Yeah. Some translations will use the word Lord, all right, which really has more of a European influence, which again, Lord means sir, all right, in European languages.
Oh.
All right, so sir, who are you exactly? Okay, right. Remember, sir or Lord is what they call the Caesar. See, Paul is going to be a big proponent of calling Jesus Lord, not the Caesar. All right, but we haven't gotten there yet. We'll see that in his letters. All right, because he's going to do the contrast, which is a gigantic political contrast. All right, Jesus is Lord, not the Caesar. Jesus is Son of God, not the Caesar, because those were titles they used for the Caesar. But Paul is going to use Jesus. All right, so he definitely takes sides. All right. So verse 10, there was a disciple in Damascus named Ananias. And the Lord said to him in a vision, Ananias, he answered, Here I am, Lord. The Lord said to him, Get up and go to the street called Straight,
Right.
and ask at the house of Judas for a man from Tarsus named Saul. He's there praying. And in a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias. Okay, so Ananias has a vision, but so does Paul. All right. Come in and lay his hands on him. All right. So Paul is seeing this vision of this man come in and lay his hands on him, that he may regain his sight.
Right.
Okay. But Ananias replied, Lord, I've heard from many sources about this man, what evil things he has done to your holy ones in Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the chief priests to imprison all who call upon your name. All right. So Ananias isn't going to run over there. He says, wait a second. I don't want to get arrested today. But the Lord said to him, Go, for this man is a chosen instrument of mine to carry my name before the Gentiles, kings, and Israelites. And I will show him what he will have to suffer for my name. Okay.
That's right.
Verse 16 is probably a verse that is put in many years after this event. Okay, not during the event. Why? Because Paul does wind up being the apostle to the Gentiles. But on this day, it's kind of too soon. That's not exactly what happened. All right? He's called, and he's called to be baptized. All right? We'll see that in a few minutes. All right? But how he's going to minister, we'll learn about that as time goes on. All right? So this is exactly where Luke is throwing in something. Why? Because Luke already knows what Paul does. He goes to the people who are non-Jews. As a matter of fact, he goes to the people who want to be converted to Judaism. And so it's kind of in the conversion class that Paul talks to these folks and says, don't join them. Join the people of the way instead. All right. So it did create some enemies. It created a lot of enemies, but we'll talk more about that. So Ananias went and entered the house, laying his hands on him, and said, Saul, my brother, the Lord has sent me, Jesus, who appeared to you on the way by which you came, that you may regain your sight and be filled with the Holy Spirit. Okay? So his eyes will be opened. Why? Because now he sees Spirit at work in him. All right? It's when you and I open our eyes, when we actually see what the Spirit is doing in our lives, when we look at things like, how did I survive that? How did I get through that? How did I deal with this other thing? Okay? It's by the Spirit's working, right? And when we have the eyes to see that, then we can say, thank you, God. All right? And until we get to that point, we don't realize it's God who's helping us. All right? Immediately, things like scales fell from his eyes and he regained his sight. He got up, and as soon as he was able to see, it's not only talking about his eyes and his head, it's the eyes of his heart. He got up and was baptized. And when he had eaten, he recovered his strength. All right. What came together? Baptism and communion.
Mm-hmm.
You see that? He had received his strength from sharing in what eventually becomes, for Paul in Corinthians, the body of Christ. All right. So the symbol it appears all over Acts of the breaking of the bread and the, eating communion and bringing it home and all of this stuff. Well, this is another one of those signs. Okay. So he's baptized, and then shares in the meal of the Christians. Okay. And remember, in those days, back around the year 33, it was a full meal, right? So they ate together, right? And in the course of the dinner, just like it happened at the Passover meal, in the course of the dinner, the leader or the householder or whoever it was broke some bread and shared it with everybody. And at the end of the meal, they would share a cup of wine together and saying those words, right? That Jesus, on the night before he died, broke bread and said, remember me when you do this. Share a cup. When he shared the cup, whoever led this meal, remember me, all right? It was all about the sharing of a meal, all right? So, and now he's strengthened. Again, he's strengthened on a bunch of levels, all right? Because they were going to be arrested. Instead, they offer the meal of communion. He's called brother. He's welcomed. He's baptized into their community. He's one of them who was their enemy. Again, they made this a living reality. See, whatever it means to be a Christian means those who are enemies have to become sisters and brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's not real. Okay? And that's what we see happens with this experience of Saul, all right? Also, you know, kind of teachers, and probably we were even taught, I surely was taught this when I was a kid, you know, before his conversion, he's called Saul. After his conversion, he's called Paul, all right?
Right.
But Saul is Hebrew, Paul is Roman. It's just the same word, okay? The name really didn't change. It's just the language changed, all right? He was no longer, what we can look at, and this could be a little bit of a negative thing, what we could look at is Christianity very much adopted a lot of Greek things.
Mm-hmm.
Really, remember, the whole of the New Testament was written in Greek, all right? It wasn't written in Aramaic and it wasn't written in Hebrew. It was written in Greek. So a lot of translations, a lot of Greek mythology, all of that came into it. And because you and I don't speak Greek, nor do we speak Hebrew, we were taught when we were kids. See what happened after his conversion. He was no longer Saul. Now he was Paul. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, it was the same name, all right? It was like me going to Spanish class, and before I went to Spanish class, I was Joseph, and after I went to the class, well, now I'm Jose. Well, I'm the same person, and it's the same name, just a different translation, okay? So we kind of have to bring that all together, all right? They tried making it dramatic for us when we were kids, but it's important to see that, you know, that this is the whole story. All right. So we're going to stop there. We'll stop at, really, it's the middle of verse 19. But we'll stop there because then Saul begins to preach. So we'll pick up with that, which is the second part of 19. All right. Any questions, thoughts, ideas, insights, anything?
So my thought is, Father dear. So Saul, the Hebrew, becomes Paul, the Roman.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's
Paul
my
the
little
Greek.
piece.
Paul the Greek, not Paul the Roman. Right.
Oh, wait a minute.
Saul
the Hebrew.
Saul is
Saul the Hebrew.
And Paul is Greek.
Oh, Paul is Greek.
Language,
Right.
yes, the language.
Yes, he didn't become a citizen of Greece,
right.
But it was just the name, just the translation.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah.
Father dear, this might find me laughing. But you know, when I like the way you preach like you're teaching. One of my friends at church say you are the professor in the church. So when you preach, and I'm laughing because That's the way I do things. I have to laugh.
Mhm.
If you don't put any fun into it, we would never understand. And
Yeah.
that's the way it should be. And I thank you very much for helping
You're
me to.
welcome.
I'm not giggling, but I'm just laughing or chuckling. I should say chuckling. Okay.
The Father Deal, is this
Yes.
the same Paul who is friends with Mark, that they were in this brotherhood
Yes.
together?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
John Mark. All right. And
So,
so
John Mark.
John Mark then
Mhm.
is probably the author of Mark's gospel.
I
Okay.
was just right. I was just going to ask you: is it possible that Mark was wrote one of the unauthorized versions of Paul's letters? Because at some point they had a falling out, right?
Yeah, it could be. He could be, but
Mhm.
probably not. Only
Mhm.
because of reading Mark's gospel. See, Mark's gospel has the same radicalness of Jesus everywhere. And
Mhm.
Paul was radical. He accepted women as peers. He criticized the government. He did all of those things, just like Jesus. He went outside of the cultural bounds and the religious bounds, just like Jesus.
But he
And
sounds a
Mark
little bit
did.
like John of Patmos too, in his writings.
John of Patmos too, same thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So what I mean, if we sometimes when you use these words, that it creates a thought in people's head that I don't necessarily want, but it's the best word we could use. We could say that the inauthentic writings of Paul were written by people who were much more conservative,
Mhm.
wanted the old ways kept, who wanted even non-Jews to be circumcised. That was not Paul's way at all, and wanted them to keep the Jewish kosher laws. That was not Paul's, nor was it Jesus's way. Remember Jesus saying, what you put into your mouth isn't the problem. It's what comes out. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And then he lists all sins, of how we can, it's our actions. Yeah. So don't get all bogged down on the law about, what you eat. And Paul is so into that. It's a matter of fact, that's exactly what we heard today in the reading from Romans, and Father preached on it. All right. It was all about the law. That Paul ultimately says the law is rubbish. It's not something you need to follow. You need to follow faith, where God has touched your heart already. That's what you need to follow. The law makes you pat yourself on the back because you followed the law. But Jesus didn't teach that. Jesus said it was another way. That's why Jesus could go into the temple even
That's why I
and
use the
throw
term
over.
worrisome.
What? Say that again, Ms. Curtis.
That's why I use the term worrisome.
Yeah.
Because that's what Jesus was about.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was not somebody who was humble, like he's waiting for somebody to hand him pie. He fought his way.
No, because it's such a improper way to understand. That idea of Jesus gentle and mild. Well, he was not gentle.
Right,
He was
gentle
mild.
Jesus.
Right? he was a warrior in terms of he was going to tell the truth even if folks didn't like it.
Yes, that's an old word, worrisome.
Okay, it is.
That's an old word. Oh, God.
Was a good trouble.
Yes, good trouble. Exactly. Yes.
Good trouble.
Yes. Yeah. All right.
Father Deal, I can't help but saying.
Yes.
I can't help but saying that the first time when I met you and you told me that you're a teacher, remember what I called you?
No.
I said, oh, so we have the preacher teacher.
The preacher teacher.
And somebody was talking about, admiring your ability to preach and teach. And, I was, just saying, reflecting on the moment, at the back of the church.
Well, we said the professor.
So,
Professor.
well,
Oh, boy.
this is kind of how, just to put this in a better context. My closest friend in this seminary, we even had gone to high school together. We were in the seminary at the same time, and we basically were considered the village idiots. So I never think of myself as a professor. We were basically the village idiots, and we laughed our way through the seminary and actually got ordained. So, yeah. So it's whatever good that we can share, we share, and that's what's really important.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
So, all right, excellent. Thank you all.
Quickly,
Thank you
so
too.
much.
Take care,
All right.
Joe.
Have a great
Excellent.
day.
Thank you.
Brother Joy, I
Have
just
a-
want to
All
make
right.
a quick
Thank you very much.
Reading,
Get your
Father.
coffee.
Have a great day and a
Father
wonderful
Daly.
week.
Yes.
For reading,
Thank
what are we
you,
reading?
Father.
For reading,
Thank you.
Paul.
Yes, we're going to read Paul. So I think we're going to do the first letter that we're going to search on is going to be Paul's letter to Philemon, which is like just a page long, but it'll give us a good understanding of how we understood slavery in the Roman Empire and the challenge that he gave to this guy who was his friend. All right, so he knew him, was a member of the church there. The other, but we're gonna finish reading chapter 9 of Acts. We're gonna look at chapter 22 of Acts. Then we're gonna look at chapter 26. So I want to do that's going to be the introduction. But then the first letter we'll look at is the letter of Philemon. So you can read any or all of what I just said. Okay,
On the
22.
back. Okay.
Okay, so
Just
that we have
reiterate again, Father Deal. Reiterate.
Yes.
Paul, chapter
the rest
9.
of yes, the rest of 9.
The rest of 9 and 10.
Okay, or chapter 22, because we're going to read that. It's a
22.
second conversion story. And then
Right.
chapter 26, it's a third conversion story.
26,
And then
right.
we're going to read the letter of Philemon, but realize that's probably about 3 weeks away because we spend a little more time in conversation,
All right.
so which is fine. But just if you wanted to read ahead, that those would be good things to do.
Repeat again,
Right.
Father. 10, 9 or 10?
9, 22, and 26.
9, 22, and
Right.
26.
9,
thank you.
22, 26. Yeah. Okay.
And
Thank
then
you.
Philemon.
Excellent.
22, 26.
Excellent. Good.
All righty.
All right. Thank you all.
Brother
Thank
Joe,
you
just a
so
quick
much.
comment. Brother
Thank you.
Joe.
Have a great week,
Yes.
everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
You too.
You too.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
day.
Thank you,
Professor.
Father. Down to the family.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much.
We still haven't had enough people signing up yet, Father.
Keep signing up for the Seder meal, please. Okay.
Okay.
I did today.
Great,
Brother,
great.
I
Thank
did
you.
today too.
All right.
Brother
well,
Joe, I
get
just want to make a
Alrighty.
quick
50,
comment.
at
When you
least
spoke
50.
about being
Huh?
the village idiots,
Yeah.
I always remember when Shakespeare, the fool,
Uh-huh.
he always was the one who was seeing and understanding everything. He
Mm,
wasn't an idiot, so he just was the fool,
right.
the comedy, the humor, but
Mhm.
he
Who
was
stayed in the
not
class?
exactly. He was not the idiot.
Yeah.
He
He was
wasn't
the fool that
foolish.
stayed.
He wasn't stupid. He was an intelligent person.
Mhm.
They just called him the
Well,
fool.
of course.
I'm thinking the same
We
thing when you say you and your friend were
like
the
a
village
fool.
idiots. That brought that to mind.
Yes, probably so.
He just stayed. He just stayed the course.
Yes, the fools were quite
Okay.
intelligent in Shakespeare.
Yes.
Yes,
Saw
I
and
know.
understood everything. And
That's
give the
it.
commentaries. They were the give the background to things like what you're doing. Thank you very much.
You're
Yes.
Thank
welcome.
you.
Is there a cost for
Thank
the
you, dear.
Seder meal? What's the cost for the
Thank
Seder
you.
meal, Joe?
$30.
$10.
$10.
Oh, 10? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Great.
Okay. You'll get your
Good
coffee.
afternoon, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Stay
Have a
well.
good
All
day.
right. Good day. Good day, all.
Good